Hello and welcome to Pots and Trowels. This week I'm starting off in the vegetable garden. We're going to be doing some autumn sowing and planting and also a little bit of shrub pruning. Well, we're in the vegetable garden and pretty much all the summer veg is finished now, and I'm gradually clearing it out and getting it into the compost bin. But there's still things that we can be doing, and obviously we've got crops to enjoy over the winter, things like the leeks and the cauliflowers and the cabbages and the broccoli and marrows that we're going to harvest and store. So still quite a lot to do in the garden. But what I'm going to do on this little bit of spare ground where the onions were earlier in the summer is I'm going to sow a green manure. And a green manure is basically a crop that we can sow into the soil, and this is a mixture of things like clover and various brassica type leaves that we can sow on here and let them germinate and grow and get to about 6 to 8 inches tall. The benefit is they retain some of the nutrients that are in the soil. It prevents them from washing through with the winter rains. And then what we do in late winter, we cultivate them and dig them in, so they then add organic soil. So it really helps to keep the soil in good condition or to improve it. And they're really easy to sow at this time of the year. So all we need to do is very simply just rake the soil lightly. We don't need to do any fancy soil preparation. I pulled out the few weeds that were in there and the soil is nice and moist anyway. And a packet of this size will cover about 20 square metres, and it contains various clovers in there, ryegrass and mustard and other legumes in there. So we're going to sow that over the soil now. So I'm going to sow it nice and thinly, and we can see there all the different mixed seeds, and we just sow thinly broadcasting over the soil that we've raked. So we don't want it too thick. We want to make sure it covers the amount of space. And then once we've finished sowing it, all we do, and I'll finish that later on, is using the rake again, just lightly rake that in to the surface of the soil. And there's no need to water that in because the ground's nice and moist. That will germinate in a few weeks, grow over the winter, and then late winter we can dig it in. But I've got a bit of sowing and planting to do in that part of the garden now. Other things that we can be doing in the vegetable garden now, middle of October time, because there's still time to plant some things and sow. One is garlic, and this is one of the hardneck garlics I grew earlier this year. If you haven't grown your own, then buy some garlic bulbs now from a garden centre, and it's time to plant out the individual cloves. So when you buy it, just split it into individual cloves like that. We plant them roughly twice their depth in the soil. You want a well-drained soil, and the reason we plant them in October is because then they will make a really good root system, and they need a cold period to make them grow well. So plant your garlic in the garden now, and that will do really well. And other things that we can be sowing directly into the garden, again, if you've got a well-drained soil, are peas. This is a variety called Meteor, which is a dwarf variety, and we sow that into the soil now. And the other thing we can sow now is broad beans, because they are really hardy. And if you choose one of the dwarf varieties and things like Aqua Dulce, or this is a dwarf one called the Sutton, they're ideal for sowing in October into November, directly into the soil in a well-drained soil. They will overwinter as small plants, and then it gives us a head start next year. So it means we can start to pick our beans 2 or 3 weeks earlier than a spring sowing. So things that you can be getting on with. And finally, if you like your cabbages and spring cabbage, now is the perfect time to put your spring cabbage in. And these are some young plants that I raised from seed. The seed was sown end of August, early September. I grew them on in these cell trays, and they've made lovely strong plants now. So we're going to put these in the garden. This is on the ground where I grew broad beans this year. They've left their roots in, so I haven't dug the ground. All beans leave nitrogen in the soil, which is beneficial to make the cabbages grow. So it's just a case of digging a hole. And a little tip when you're planting any type of cabbage, cauliflower, Brussels or whatever, plant it nice and deep so that it doesn't flop about, and that helps it to root from the stem, and then you get a much stronger plant. And what I will do is plant these about a foot apart, and they'll be ready to pick and harvest next April. But what I will also do is to cover them over with some netting, because if I don't, I can guarantee that the pigeons will get them before I do. A really good summer flowering shrub, especially into late summer, is the Buddleja, often known as the butterfly bush, because it attracts so many different butterflies on it. They finish flowering now for the year, and they flower on new wood, so this is all this season's wood. What we tend to do at this time of the year is to reduce them in height, and roughly by about half, because if we don't, they can blow around in the winter gales and it can damage them. They're quite brittle. It's very simple, just a pair of secateurs, freshly sharpened, and then just snip them down by half like that, so it tidies them up and it stops that wind rock. What we do is we go over the whole plant, cutting it down just to reduce the height of it, and then next March, before it starts to grow, I'll come and cut this even further back, and that'll promote really strong growth and lovely big blooms next summer. Well, thank you for watching again, and thank you to Cobra for their support and sponsorship. And if you do enjoy this, please tell all your friends about it, and we'll see you next week.